So if I hear that Netflix has a documentary about Jeffrey Epstein, of course I'm going to add it to my queue. But was it a very enjoyable experience? Oh boy. Oh boy. What's going on, you guys? James here with another real review, and today I'm talking all about the Jeffrey Epstein documentary on Netflix called Filthy Rich, and it deals with the survivors of, or at least some of the survivors of, Jeffrey Epstein's sexual abuse and unfortunate sex trafficking. And yes, it's very tough to stomach, and most of the time I was finding myself having to pause and refresh and just come back to it because it is not an easy pill to swallow. But what this documentary does is uncover a lot that you might not know about in this case. So guys, before I get started and give you what I loved and what I didn't love about this documentary, if it's your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James. Now if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the big red button below and subscribe to the channel. We talk movies and TV on this channel, and I love it every single day. Also, I like talking with you guys, so go ahead and get loud in the comments below and let me know what you think of this documentary when you see it, and don't forget to smash that like button because does a lot of good for the channel. Okay guys, so let's go ahead and dive into this documentary. If you're unaware, of course, during the middle of the week, I want to say, this documentary dropped on Netflix and it's starting to pick up a lot of traction. It's directed by Lisa Bryant, and what it is 4 episodes. They're about 1 hour each, and yes, that's 4 hours of your day. It's kind of like, you know, the director's cut of a Lord of the Rings film, but it's worth your time in some regards. For those who are not familiar with this case, it gives you a lot of backstory, and a lot of this backstory I knew of because being here in Florida, you kind of understand the implications. Jeffrey Epstein had a huge estate in Palm Beach where a lot of his crimes were committed, but it goes further than that, and I actually didn't know that he took this internationally as well. Such a horrible man, and you know, he deserved to be in jail for the rest of his life. The story, you know, as you know it, he committed suicide while he was in jail. But it definitely is one of those documentaries that you have to kind of prepare yourself for mentally. I'm not going to go ahead and tell you that this is for everyone. If you're a fan of crime documentaries, you'll probably be able to stomach this. But if you are a family person, let's say you have like kids of your own, daughters of your own, this is going to be hard for you to sit down and really get through 4 hours worth. You're going to have to split your time up. That's the thing. What I did here was, yes, sit down 4 hours straight and I was finished with the documentary in a day. But this is not going to be easy for some people who are casually turning on Netflix, see a documentary they think is going to be more so about uncovering who Jeffrey Epstein was working with, because it does that, not a lot, but it does that briefly. This is more so about the survivors. So let's get started there. The way the documentary handles interviewing some of the key survivors here that want to speak up is just great. I think it's awesome that there's a platform for these women to come forward and basically tell you what their experience was like while, you know, working for Jeffrey Epstein. And it is awful the way they were cornered. These women didn't deserve to go through any of this, and it's just such a harrowing experience, but you get to see it through their eyes. So that's what this documentary does that is different from a lot of the reports I've read, whether it be online or if I'm watching TV in the news. I haven't seen something like this on Jeffrey Epstein so far, and immediately you know you're in for a ride that is most likely, again, not going to be enjoyable. There's a disclaimer at the beginning of every episode that says a lot of this does deal with cases and minors, and this is not going to be fun. They might as well have just said that. This is not going to be fun. And, you know, I don't think it was ever intended to, and it did a good job for the most part. The first episode is definitely enticing, and what it does is it gets you in the mood that the documentary wants to put you in. Anger, frustration, passion for these survivors, and really just wondering what in the world was happening during this time, because he was getting away with so much already in the first episode. Now, I didn't know too much about Jeffrey Epstein's past, but it dove into that, which was great, and also a lot of what happened the first time he got in trouble with the law. That I didn't know about. And just to stay on the topic of intros for a couple seconds, I love what the director does here in terms of framing every episode to start the same. It's footage that the prosecution had, I guess, submitted here of his deposition, and the prosecution is grilling him, and it is great. It's a grilling process for him probably, but I don't care because he deserves to get grilled. It was really interesting to see how the director kind of kept a consistent tone throughout the entire documentary. There's no sense here of happiness until the very end, of course, but it is interesting to see how everything was paced. Now, the pacing works both for this documentary and against it, because after episode 1, yes, I was locked in, but episode 2 kind of trends downward, and for me, I felt that it was the weakest of this entire original documentary, and unfortunately, that's when I thought, oh man, is this going to turn out to be as good as I was hoping it was going to be? There were important details within the episode, but overall I almost felt like the documentary didn't really hit home with me there. But episodes 3 and 4 were definitely more gripping and kind of back to what we expected from episode 1. I think that maybe they didn't have too much material to work with, or maybe I was just really hoping they would stop talking so much about his past, even though you need to understand him. But I wanted to just hear from the survivors more so than anything. I'm glad they kind of got back to that towards the end of episode 2 and then into episode 3 and 4. Now, I know I said this might not be for everybody because of the subject matter, but also because of information overload. If you missed it, I reviewed The Last Dance and we talked about how the director decided to time jump back and forth. Here is pretty much the same approach. You go from 2006 to 1990s, you go all the way to 2018, 2019, you're going back and forth so rapidly sometimes that if you're not paying attention, you're gonna miss out, and some people might not enjoy that. I'll admit it. I was exhausted. There were some moments like I had to pause this, get up and stretch and think, okay, where are we now? And I do appreciate time jumps, but you're gonna find yourself a little exhausted, so stick with it because I'm not gonna lie guys, it ends on a high note. However, it also ends on an uncertain note, and the biggest question for me going in here was, I knew of his acts. I didn't know in depth of what he did, and learning about that was totally gut-wrenching. But I wanted them to address the suicide in prison. If you're gonna ask me, no, I don't think he was alone in that. I think there were some people that probably wanted him dead because of the high-profile individuals that he dealt with. Listen, this documentary puts it out there. It doesn't shove it down your throat in terms of its one side or the other side bias, which is great, but it points out a very important fact from one of the coroners, if I'm not mistaken. He showed the bone that they said was like crushed or whatever in his neck, and that didn't come from, well, doing what he did in prison according to the police. So it's interesting to just get those approaches, and it ended on such a high note because I thought, okay, this was definitely a well thought out documentary, and not only that, I'm very glad it was only 4 episodes because I don't think I could have taken another 2-hour episodes. I love the 1-hour length sometimes, but in episode 2, that's where I kind of felt maybe they could have broken this up because you might need a little bit more of a breather. An hour of this kind of material can sometimes be a lot for people, and it might have been a little overwhelming for me sometimes too. But that does not take away at all the fact that Lisa Bryant was able to give a platform to these survivors that were willing to speak up, and I'm so glad that they're not done fighting for those victims of sexual abuse that are not actually speaking up. So again, this paints a more in-depth picture of what Epstein did and the heinous acts, but it also provides new information for those who are very familiar with this case. Now, listen, I was vaguely familiar with most of the details here, but I didn't know that, for example, Jeffrey Epstein had somebody helping him out. It was like his right-hand person. Ghislaine Maxwell, if I'm pronouncing that improperly, correct me in the comments below, but Ghislaine Maxwell is awful. She decides to decline so many chances to basically speak for herself in this documentary series. They make it a note, especially at the end of episodes, that she's declined to comment, and yeah, she's guilty. But there are so many different players in this, like the President of the United States, for goodness sake, and former President Bill Clinton, and even Prince Andrew. It's just totally awful. So if you're just like me and wondering, is this something that I really should dedicate 4 hours of my day to? I would say yes, if you're interested in knowing a little bit more about the psyche of the situation and those involved, and exactly how much you might not have known either, because there were a couple of different aspects of this story in this case that I definitely didn't know about. However, if you feel like you know a lot about this case and just don't want to go through all this emotion again, this is one that you probably won't enjoy literally spending 4 hours of your time with. In terms of it being a documentary, I think it's good. It's just not flashy, and I wouldn't say it's even great. We've seen better Netflix documentaries. Now, in terms of the education value of the documentary, yeah, I learned a few things, and I think that I have more, knowledge about the case in general and the survivors, but I don't think I would have stuck with the hour-long episode format. If anything, breaking it up and doing 30 minutes might have been even better, just something that's easier to digest, because like I said, there's so much information here that sometimes you can get overwhelmed. Alrighty guys, well there you have it. That's my review of Netflix's documentary on Jeffrey Epstein called Filthy Rich. If you enjoyed everything you just heard and saw, again, don't forget to hit the big red button below and subscribe to the channel and tap on that bell to stay up to date, because guys, we got a lot of The Last Airbender content coming next week. Also, if you haven't already, smash the like button and comment below and let me know what you think of this documentary. Was it worth your time, or is it something that you feel people can skip. Alright, you guys, again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening.